right now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Yoga Philosophy Study Group coming to you from the Yoga Center of Chico. I'm Lauren Carley. That's my voice. You can't see my video today. With me is Tom Hess, an owner of the Yoga Center of Chico. In this series, we're currently studying the Bhagavad Gita, and this is the last chapter, chapter 18. And we discuss how the Gita relates to your life. And Tom, I don't know if it's worth holding up the book at this point since we're on the last chapter. But yes,
my version is different than your version.
Yep.
But here it is.
Thanks. So each session is recorded and can be found on the Yoga Center of Chico's YouTube channel. Each live session at the YCC is also linked to a live Zoom account. These occur on the fourth Thursday of every month at 5:30 Pacific time, and anyone can join the live session. You can see the Yoga Center of Chico's website for our contact information and be added to our mailing list. Now I'm honored to present introduce Tom Hess for chapter 18, the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Tom?
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of us, you, me, all of us who participated. We've gone through a year and a half now, and we've skipped a couple of months. So we're now at the culmination of the Bhagavad Gita. And this is, I think this is appropriate because a text like this can't be like read through and understood and put on the shelf. It needs to be absorbed. It needs to be thought about. It needs to be talked about with some peers or people who are interested. So I appreciate your presence to help that happen. Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18. Again, Krishna and Arjuna are talking, discussing things. And Krishna starts to talk about these two types of detachment, how one differs from the other. So there's two types of detachment talked about here, sannyasa and tyaga. Sannyasa is a term that I've come into contact with previously. It's the term that describes someone, a spiritual seeker, who removes themselves from society and goes into the woods in seclusion and isolation and seeks enlightenment. It's a well-traveled path for many enlightened beings in the world. Okay. That's what this actually means, sannyasa, removing yourself from the world and not acting in any way that you might accumulate in any samskaras or karmas or things that might inhibit your spiritual progress. There's another kind of renunciation called tyaga. And this is quite different. Well, it's similar but different. It's similar in that you're renouncing your actions and not being attached to them. But it goes deeper than that. You're not only renouncing your actions, you're renouncing the intention behind them. So it's sort of like you're cleaning up your psychic self. There's the actions, and then there's the thoughts or attachments to the actions. Sannyasa is removing yourself from the attachments. Tyaga is removing yourself from the inclinations or the desires for those attachments, those underlying psychic attachments that we all create, which really seems to me to be the big message in the Gita, that it's not so much that we detach from the world, or it's that we detach from the attachments we have to the world, which is sort of what tyaga means. Okay, then there's three types of tyaga, and we're going to go over this a little bit more in detail later. But there's the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamasic states. The sattvic state of luminosity, the rajasic state of activity, and the tamasic state of lethargy. Okay, so these are three concepts that we're going to be revisiting in this chapter. And then he goes on to speak about how you get to this state of Tyaga. How do we, it's easy to talk about it. It's easy to discuss it. It's so hard to enact it. And that's what Krishna is trying to describe here. The three important elements, yagna, dana, and tapas. Yagna is this idea of self-sacrifice. It's the thing that we give honor or sacrifice to the gods who come before us, to the energies that come before us, and it's sort of like we have to put a little bit out there to really honor that. Then there's dana, D-A-N-A, and that means giving. It's contributions towards spiritual enlightened, or not even enlightened beings, spiritual teachers. There's a strong tradition in many meditative practices or ashrams, where the price of whatever service that you're getting from that teacher isn't set. It's dana. You give what you want, you don't give what you want. And that's this idea of dana. Then there's self-discipline, tapas, this idea that we have to work hard for whatever of these spiritual attributes we're going to work on. You know, a perfect example is the asana. We work pretty hard in the asana and try to further our spiritual development. These three elements, yagna, dana, and tapas, self-sacrifice, giving, and self-discipline, purify the disciple, the practitioner. They clean out the disciple. Okay. By the way, Krishna does not advocate the sannyasa path of renunciation, going into the forest. He fully advocates engaging in the world, but not being attached to the world, not being attached to your actions in the world and so forth. So Krishna very clearly states, this is a better path. Tyaga is a better path than sannyasa. Okay. Then he goes in to talk a little bit about the means of action. And this was actually referred to as one of the concepts of Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya philosophy is the umbrella that yoga is listed under. Samkhya philosophy is one of the 6 classical philosophies of yoga, of India, of the spiritual or philosophical lineages of yoga, India. One of this is Samkhya, and underlying under the umbrella of Samkhya is yoga. So he's talking here about how somebody acts. Well, you need the body, you need the means of actions, you need the ego to perpetuate it, you have the performance of the act, and then you have the divine will behind the act. So one of the things about chapter 18, there's a couple of different themes he's talking about here. Initially, he talked about sannyasa and tyaga. Then he talked about these 3 elements to purify: self-sacrifice, giving, and self-discipline. Now he's talking about these means of action, the Samkhya philosophy. But then, one of the most interesting elements of the chapter 18 is verse 17, because it really brings us back to the first chapter. And this is what verse 17 says. The person who is free from ego, who has attained purity of heart, though he slays these people, does not slay, is not bound by his action. So this is the whole point. Krishna is telling Arjuna, remember, because don't forget, we're in the middle of a field of battle. Krishna and Arjuna are in a philosophical discussion about Arjuna's action or inaction in this battle. And Krishna is saying here in the last chapter, hey, your job is to be a warrior. Don't worry about it. If you have purity of heart, if you have free from ego, then the people you slay, they are really not slain, because they'll come back in the future lives. So this is one of the basic premises that Krishna presents here. There really is no killing for the purity of heart. Then then he goes into a little bit about knowledge, the idea of knowledge. And this is sort of interesting because Prashant Iyengar, I've heard lectures from him about this topic of knowledge, the thing to be known, and the knower. All of these three elements, the knowledge, there's a body of knowledge, there's the thing to be known, and then there's the knower, the person who observes that and tries to understand that. And these three elements have to be a part of any accumulation of knowledge or understanding. You can't leave out any part of it. And then he starts to talk about, then he goes into about, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states of being that he's going to look at through the lens of the gunas. Remember, so let's quickly review. Sattvic is the guna of luminosity. Rajasic behavior is the behavior of activity. Tamasic behavior is the lethargy. Okay, what does this translate into actual people? Okay, the sattvic person sees the unity in all beings. Basic premise, we're all connected. Sattvic people sees it. The Rajasic person sees themselves separate and distant from the people around them, isolated. We're not isolated, we're all connected. A Rajasic person doesn't understand that, sees the separation, not the unity. The Tamasic person sees one small part of the whole and thinks it's the whole. A very ignorant way of seeing, not looking at the big picture. Okay, so his knowledge is very limited, but he thinks he's seeing a lot. The Rajasic person, his knowledge, you're separate from whatever knowledge base you have. Okay, then he goes to the topic of work. How does one work in the world? Well, the Sattvic person works to fulfill one's obligations. So we're all put in this world with a sense of with certain obligations, sort of our dharmas, our purpose in life. And we're going to get into it a little bit in a little bit later, that our purposes in life. And so a Sattvic person fulfills those purposes, fulfills his work in the world that he's destined to do. He's free from ego. He looks and works in such a way that he's not seeking personal reward, but for the good of the community. The Rajasic person works in the mode of selfish desire. He's wanting to be, his self-will needs to be imposed. He wants to be in charge. He needs rewards. He needs to be fed through these actions and work. The Tamasic person, it just works blindly. He goes through undisciplined, out of considering of the consequences, just goes through the work without really considering it. Okay, that's how Krishna describes knowledge and work. Now we get to understanding. And of course, what Krishna is talking about is understanding some of these deeper philosophical elements. Okay, so the Sattvic person is discriminating. They know what is right. They know what is wrong. They refrain from things that are wrong, and they pursue the things that are right. They're seeking freedom from bondage. Now, this bondage isn't like handcuffs. It's mental handcuffs, emotional handcuffs, samskaras, these things that are attached to our emotional body that prevent our being free. Okay, as far as understanding go, the Rajasic person confuses right and wrong. They don't know what's right or wrong. And sometimes it's a little confusing what's really right. What's right for one person might be not for another. A Tamasic person sees a darkness, or is always making the wrong decisions, or doesn't understand things well and then confuses it and thinks they do understand things well. Okay, so that's as far as understanding. As far as self-will or self-discipline or willpower, the sattvic person develops this willpower through meditation. He keeps the prana, the mind, and senses in harmony. So this is where the physical asana and pranayama practice comes to play. When one keeps their prana and mind in harmony, they have a better willpower, more strength to do their practices. The Rajasic person is selfish. He's always seeking wealth and pleasure, self-aggrandizement. He's not really working for that deeper spiritual understanding. Tamasic person is obstinate, ignorant, slothful, conceited, thinking they're always seeing things the right way, but they're really seeing things the wrong way. Okay, that's how Krishna sees willpower or will in the context of the three gunas. Now we turn to some happiness. How does Krishna see happiness in the three gunas? Well, the sattvic person, when they pursue something, it might be distasteful at first, discipline, but the nectar or the pleasant element of that action comes later. So delayed gratification, that's what it is. Delayed gratification, a sattvic person, as it does to happiness. You go through some struggle and strifes and discipline at the beginning, but at the end, you get something better out of it. They try to keep their mind at peace. There's nothing that destroys happiness rather than a disrupted personal life. It's just tragic. Okay, a Rajasic person, it's the reverse. The pleasures first and the negative results later, or the discipline later. The sattvic person and the Rajasic person reverse roles, and they then lead to this element of having to recoup, reevaluate, knowing they did the wrong thing to begin with, but seeing it at the end. The tamasic person, they get pleasure from sleep, intoxication, delusion. They think they're happy, but they're not really. So that's just a whole mixed bag there. And no creature is devoid of these gunas. We all have them. Everybody always has them. It has having to do with the different proportions that we exhibit at any given time as it deals with each of these elements that I just talked about, and of course many others. You can get the general sense of the difference between a sattvic action, a rajasic action, and a tamasic action. So our goal as yoga practitioners is to move towards the sattvic, away from the tamasic, by the means of the rajasic. Okay, then he goes on to say, all right, what are truly the duties that need to be done for us to fulfill our dharma? Okay, this goes to the caste system. It's referring to the caste system in ancient India. And I think perhaps over the centuries, the caste system has gotten a bit distorted. And it's not as, it's sort of like the old caste system grew out of society. And the new caste system is like society is imposing these castes on others. So the four caste categories in ancient India are the Brahmin. They have self-control, patience, purity. They're the priestly class. The Kshatriya, they have courage, strength, leadership. They're the warrior class. They're the leaders, the warriors, the people in charge, never retreating from battle, being a good leader to the men or people around you. the Vaishya, which is the agricultural class or trade class, and then the Shudra, which is the service class. They do all of the service jobs in the society. So the point is, each of these castes have duties. These duties are to be performed in this guna type way that are clearly described in the previous verses. Okay. These castes are responsible for fulfilling their duties, those descriptions that I just described to you. Okay. And something that's important, I noted it, in verse number 47, it is better to perform one's own duties imperfectly than to master the duties of another. That's pretty important. So to know and understand these duties that you're prescribed to perform based on your caste system in society are more important to do them imperfectly than to try to move up or down or do something different than the caste you're assigned to. So this comes to what's one's dharma, what's one's purpose. Okay, how does one really attain this spiritual perfection? Well, the highest state is the Brahman state. And Krishna's describing this. How do you get to be a Brahmin? Not in the priestly class, just within. Okay, well, you're free from selfish attachments. The life is full of meditation, controlling speech, body, and mind. They're free of self-will, aggressiveness, anger, peace within. All acts are in service to Krishna. All acts are an offering to Krishna. So these are ideas and descriptions that we've seen many times in the previous chapter in the Gita. Again, Krishna describing how a person of spiritual pursuit should act. How do you get to where Krishna is? And those are some of those descriptions. And then, of course, Krishna says to Arjuna, well, don't tell this to everybody, only tell this wisdom to the people who understand and have self-control and self-will, who are free of delusion. So here we come full circle. We've started off with Krishna and Arjuna in the battlefield, and Arjuna saying to Krishna, I can't fight. These are my family members over here. I can't do it. Krishna says, you got to do it. This is your dharma. This is your purpose. And then throughout the whole Gita, we're looking at different types of practices, different yogas, different ways of acting and being in the world that leads us to this understanding that we are not our bodies, that are the more important element is to do one's duty in life rather than be sensitive to one's ego self. Put it aside. Anyway, it has been such a pleasure to do this series with you all. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back to Lauren now. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tom. That's not an easy chapter to summarize, but I'll say that it is a summary. The author of the Gita did write this chapter in a summary form, and so my challenge to everybody in the Yoga Philosophy discussion group, if you wish to take it on, is in whatever form, whether you do it as a writing or video or even an art piece or some other form, is go back and either reread it, which this group, I think, Tom, you can nod your head, I think we'll eventually get back to rereading the Gita, because you can never run out of things to learn from it. But to go back and either skim it or summarize it, but summarize it in your own words or your own images of how it relates to your particular life. That was one of our sub themes in this last year and a half. And that's what people said they wanted, was an opportunity to explore how the Gita relates to your personal life, how you practice it in your personal life. So the challenge in summary, no pun intended, the challenge in summary is to write a little essay or in some other form of expression what the Gita means to you at this point in your personal life and how you practice it. We may or may not have time on Thursday to go over a few of those, but if somebody does bring a summary with them, we can, Tom, we can take a look at maybe having somebody read their writing or at least provide a summary of the summary.
Absolutely.
Of what they, where they see the Gita now. Because every time you read any of these documents, you get a new light on what's going on. All right, with that, we'll wrap it up and we'll post this on YouTube in a day or two, if not tonight. And hopefully we'll hear or see everybody on the Zoom channel. The links are up on the YCC website if you don't already have them. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll now turn the recording off.
Thank you. Take care, Lauren.